Hey, welcome to another comic talk. I wanted to start today by talking a little bit. Sorry about that. I wanted to start today. I have a camera and I have a little slider on it, so I had to shut off. Sorry about that, guys. I wanted to talk today about something that's been really bothering me, and that's this whole thing about the death of the comic hobby. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you it's alive every day. When I sign on, I find things that are being sold and bought. As you know, I recently went on an Atom craze, and today I happened to be the day that I got this little beauty, Atom number 7. It's a gorgeous little comic, and it's in fantastic condition. But what I really wanted to talk today is, we've all been wondering, we've all been looking at what's going on in this hobby, and we've all been seeing the prices falter. Here, just to give you a little view. See it? There we go. It's actually in really nice shape. That's the worst of it. The rest of this comic is in fantastic shape. So I really, love the fact that I got this. It's a number 7. It's a 1963, I want to say. Yep, 1963, July. And it's just a great little book. I mean, it's one of those things that I'm collecting now. The prices have dropped dramatically, therefore the access is a lot better, and the comics are great. I mean, these are absolutely beautiful covers. These are Silver Age classics that are being sold for pennies on the dollar, based on what I've been able to find. So anyway, look, in 1961, the comic industry was facing a basically their death march. Everyone thought comics were done. Comics had been born around the 1930s. If you don't know the history, they were made up originally of newspaper strips that were put together and submitted as a book and sold. I mean, they were basically a rehashing, a reprinting of those newspaper strips, and a lot of it was Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon. I think Father Knows Best was one of the ones. The Yellow Kid. So a lot of these things were out there, and started gaining momentum. Of course, there was no television at the time. Movies had just become a thing, where people were actually going to movie theaters in droves to see these movies. And, Hollywood had just been basically born, per se, in the 1930s. I mean, it was there in the 1920s, absolutely, but like the huge talkies and then color came into vogue in the 30s, and that just elevated movies again to a completely new level. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is because there was no competition for comics. Comics were something you could actually store, hold, and then enjoy when you were ready to enjoy. If you don't remember, even on television, only until recently do we have the ability to go back and forth in a film, or go back and look at something that's recorded or stream it live. Up until maybe 25 years ago, people were waiting for movies that would come around once in a lifetime, and then they would watch them. And then the CDs, and VHSs kind of accommodated the ability to store them, but nothing had the history of storing entertainment like magazines and comic books. So there were a lot of people that were into these books in the 30s and 40s. And as a matter of fact, the largest readership ever recorded, based on my knowledge, maybe now, since we're more global, there's some other things that we have, but some other people that we didn't have back then. But in any way, the entire concept was that people were buying these books in droves and in millions. Then all of a sudden, there was a big push because of the Seduction of the Innocent, which was a book that was published, and that book started attacking comics and started making people feel that this was not something they really wanted their kids around. So that, and paper drives and other things that occurred in the late 40s, started reducing the readership, and then that rebounded with horror. Horror came back out. I mean, actually, the horror was part of the reason it condensed, but horror was the last thing that actually had a fandom, and that was destroyed by that that attack on comics. So the late 50s became a very, very bad time for comic books. I know that Showcase came out with Flash, and people point to it as the resurgence of, or as the birth of the Silver Age, because the Flash for the first time showed up. Very well may be true. He was a character that was rebuilt and redone for the Silver Age. It wasn't the same Flash from the Golden Age. And the reason they called it the Golden Age was because it was so much, um, comics were so popular. They were like, Shazam would print 1 million copies of an issue. And that wasn't seen again until 1990, when Image did the, and with when Image did Spawn, and then I think when Spider-Man also came out for Marvel, and X-Men came out for Marvel, the new number ones, those blew up. But anyway, so what happened? How did comic books get saved? In 1961, Stan Lee was about to quit. Stan Lee thought this industry was done, and all they were doing were rehashing the Monster of the Month Club. It was every month there was a monster. I mean, that's where you got Groot. That's where you got Zemu, the Hulk, the original Hulk, or at least the prototype. There were a bunch of these monsters that came out. There was one called Fing Fam Foom that's actually very valuable. I don't really understand it, nor do I care to understand it, but there's a lot of people that go after that comic book. And these were the horror books after what was called the Comics Authority was created. And the Comics Authority was to control the content. So the content was very watered down. The artwork was not what it was back in the day of EC. A lot of the EC artists had actually moved to magazines. Vampirilla had come out, or not Vampirilla. Creepy had come out, Eerie had come out, and Vampirilla would follow later. But those artists and Mad Magazine took a lot. They took a lot of the EC artists with them. Um, what was left were Jack Kirby and some of the more superhero artists, Ditko, and such. And they were working for different companies. Jack and Stan were working at Marvel, creating a lot of these monster books. So was Ditko, and so were some of the other guys. I think Gene Colan, Gil Kane, some of the guys that were in the earlier part of the Silver Age, I believe were all working either at DC at the time or Marvel, but they were all producing substandard stuff until somebody took a chance, and that somebody was Stan Lee. And what he did is he said, actually, he was about to quit, told his wife he was quitting the industry, going to try to write his book. And his wife said, you need to do something before you do that. You've always wanted to write your own comic book, and you've never been allowed by the editors. Even when you've been an editor, you've looked out for what's best for the company, and you've never really done the comic book that you think would be the one you want to do it, how you want to do it. Take an opportunity, launch it now, and if it fails, it doesn't matter. You're getting out anyway. But at least you'll have the satisfaction of having done a comic book like that. And he did. And he created the Fantastic Four. Now, what's interesting about that is that the Fantastic Four led to the resurgence of the superhero comics. Now we're facing a very similar situation. The MCU has been watered down tremendously with this wokeism. The the comics, I don't know. I don't read new modern comics. I honestly don't. I mean, I read my Silver Age comics, and I'm an old Silver Age, Golden Age comic book collector. I have a ton of bronze that I'm actually selling, because I'm focusing all of my efforts to some key Silver Age and some Golden Age books. Having said that, the industry eventually started realizing that this new comic book was having huge success. The editorial room at Marvel got inundated with letters about the Fantastic Four. It would take about 3 months before they even knew what had happened. But by the time they knew what had happened, Fantastic Four was on issue 3, and they were getting their first costumes. And everything came from there. DC did not. And what happened was Stanley wrote a story like a regular author would write a novel. He created a family, story behind them, issues and challenges that they had to face, and struggles between each other, interpersonal relationships. And that seemed to capture the imagination of the reader. And also, the reader was now coming back because the reader that had been a child during the 1940s or born in the early parts of World War II were remembered those old heroes and were missing those old heroes. For example, one of those children was Neil Adams. Neil Adams was born in 1941. He was about 7 or 8 years old in the late 40s. At that time, he was probably exposed to comics, and that created his interest in becoming a comic book artist. Like many others, there were a lot of children that were now ready to relive their childhood. Therefore, Fantastic Four came up, took that dream they had, and then that the longing for those old fashioned superheroes, and just made it so much more real by placing them in New York City, not a fictitious city, giving them a building, giving you an address, and then relating their adventures through the city so that you felt like you were part of what was going on. And the bullpen itself, and Marvel, the writers at Marvel, the artists at Marvel became part of the story, and that shifted everything. That was something that hadn't been seen before. Even so, the popularity of Marvel was so great that even though DC was still ahead, DC had to quickly revamp their books. And in 1967, Neil Adams changed DC. And he changed DC by creating Batman, Deadman, and some of the other comics that came, um, that basically, and Green Lantern, Green Arrow, that matured the industry and the readership, so that the readers were now in their 20s and 30s and not just small children. A lot of them were college kids. A lot of them were still Army, military enlisted, that were overseas and were still using comics to be able to get some entertainment when there was maybe nothing but German television or French television. They didn't even understand the language. So this was a way that they could get some entertainment while they were away. Same thing happened in World War II. So needless to say, we had a repeat of the golden age, and we called it the silver age. And now we're sitting in 19 or in 2023. I mean, going into 2023, it's about 2 days before New Year's. And it's about 2 days before New Year's. And we have the same problem. We have a problem where the industry is facing a downturn. And the downturn is all because comics that were going up in price 10, 20, 30 times their value in a period of a week, sometimes before even publication. The absurdity of that, which I called 2 years ago, irrational exuberance over comic books. That irrational exuberance that was embedded in the way people were buying and chasing comics has begun to wither away because of two things. One is the availability of comics has become, especially the new ones, much more apparent to those people that are collecting and speculating. Just because something comes out in a Marvel movie doesn't mean it needs to go up immediately. If the movie's good and the viewership increases and people get interested in buying it, it will go up. But it can't go up 30 and 40 times its value from the day the movie opened to the day, I mean, from the day the first trailer opened to the day the movie opened. It just doesn't make any sense because there's nowhere to sell it after. Anybody who buys a book for investment purposes is buying it to sell it after. And I got to tell you, almost every collector I've ever met, including myself, has always thought of what I can get for my books, because the value that's attached to these books is both emotional and financial. And many times, the emotional attachment forces a greater financial value because you don't want to let it go unless somebody pays you enough to make you want to let it go. So anyway, I just wanted to say I think we're sitting in a really specific point in time again where Fantastic Four is about to land on the MCU. And I'm wondering if this is the way that Marvel Comics will be saved again by the Fantastic Four. And by the way, it may be that it'll be different from anything we've seen before, because the last time the industry was saved by the Fantastic Four. It was a completely different shift in the way stories were told and the focus around them. This time, the movie may shift again. Everything we know about comic books, superheroes, and this whole genre. So, this is just a thought I wanted to leave you guys with. It's a new year. I don't think we're gonna face the death of the comic book industry at any time, because for the last 40 years, maybe 30 years, no one ever cared about comics, and comics were still traded and sold for thousands of dollars. The popularity of comics, and I've said this repeatedly, started when the internet opened the eyes of everyone to what comic books had, what they could offer, how alluring they are, how the colors and the look of a comic book just makes you want to own it. Because you know what these are, guys? People don't talk about it much. These are not original pieces of art. The original cover of this Atom is worth probably 20, $30,000, if not 60,000. This is a print. That's how you need to treat it. It's an art print. You can read it, you can love it, but when it all comes down to it, the cover is the art print we're all buying. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I saw that a couple of you joined, and hopefully I'll get more to join the next time. Thanks a lot, and I will see you soon.